What's going on YouTube? Teach is back again with another video, and today we're talking about the AFC North in our way too early regular season prediction series. Quick disclaimer, obviously new setup. I have finished my move, still in the process of getting some stuff done, so probably, actually I think I'm planning on 4 videos this week, but it may end up just being 3. We'll see, but I appreciate everybody's patience, but this is also kind of the quote-unquote dead period of NFL content, so I appreciate everybody who's continuously checking out the videos. Like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new, comment if you think Cincinnati's going to win the division, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. I want to hear your hot takes and early record predictions down below in the comments section. And also, this is one of the best divisions of football. Would you make the argument that it is the best division of football? Love to hear your case if it is, case if it's not, all that down below in the comments section. So we'll go and check out the Cincinnati Bengals to start things off. We're going to do this in the order in which I think the AFC North will play out. But let's start by checking out their depth chart on our lads. And obviously, you start with the wide receivers, and it is probably the best wide receiver trio in the league. I mean, I know that's up for debate, and there's definitely a conversation to be had there, but Chase Higgins-Boyd to me is where it's at. Some good depth, too. Andre Yoshevich, interesting, kind of late-round pick out of Princeton. Trenton Irwin, solid contributor last year. Charlie Jones, I also think, is a guy who could probably step into that Tyler Boyd role next year as Boyd will hit the free agent market. Big money signing in Orlando Brown Jr., trying to solidify that right tackle spot. We'll see what they do with Jonah Williams. Our lads has him flipping over to right tackle. I think that could be a nice home for him, but whether it's him or it's Lyle Collins, they need to find an upgrade there one way or another. And then the interior it's not great. Ted Karras is solid enough center. Alex Kappa's a pretty good right guard. Question mark there at left guard with Cordell Volson going to year 2. You also bring in a veteran like Max Sharping. So you have a little bit of a safe floor there with Sharping, but hopefully we get a little bit more out of Volson. But all in all, the work they've done on that offensive line has been transformative. Tight end, when that wide receiver trio is as good as it is, tight end is just kind of the cherry on top. Irv Smith Jr., we've been waiting for years to see if he's going to have that breakout season. Hasn't happened yet, so I'm not banking on it. Drew Sample's a solid blocker. Joe Burrow, top 3 quarterback in the league pretty unanimously. And then Joe Mixon, that restructure of his contract, so they're going to have him back. And that whole, we're running it back mentality is a big reason why I actually think I'm pretty high on this team. And maybe a little bit higher than some would imagine a, Pittsburgh Steelers fan being. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit later on in the video. But then you get to the defense, Seb Hubbard, DJ Reader, BJ Hill, Trey Hendrickson. Really nice defensive line across the board. Good depth with, a guy like Joseph Ossai. They draft Miles Murphy in the first round. Nice contingency plan for the expiration of the contract for Hendrickson or Hubbard. So love the value there. High-end athlete in a place where he doesn't have to produce right away and just kind of learn the ropes and kind of have that Trey Hendrickson type of role like he did in New Orleans, where sit, learn and kind of be a third down specialist, and then eventually step into a starting role when you're really ready to step into that. Then you get to the linebacking core, and it's a pretty underrated group in my estimation. Jermaine Pratt's a pretty solid player. Thought they got him back on a fantastic re-sign, at least value, 3 years, $21 million. Logan Wilson, solid player, has become one of the more underrated linebackers in the NFL, in my opinion. And then Akeem Davis-Gaither is a solid third off-ball linebacker in the mix. The secondary, you get into some interesting stuff here. Chidobe Awuzie, obviously coming off injuries, he's going to be the same guy. Since he's gotten to Cincinnati, he's been really, really awesome. Cam Taylor-Britt going into year 2. I always kind of saw him more as a strong safety, but they're going to have him stick at corner. I'm interested to see how that plays out. And, of course, the safety spots, right? You lose Jesse Bates, you lose Von Bell, who were paramount for that defense. And, Dax Hill you draft in the first round, kind of with the plan in mind to use him as the replacement for Jesse Bates. So we'll see how that plays out. I liked Hill as a prospect coming out of Michigan. And I think he's got the skill set, the athleticism, and just kind of the intangibles to be a good enough Jesse Bates replacement. Obviously hard to replace one of the best players at the position, but if anybody can do it, I think Dax Hill's a pretty good candidate. And then Nick Scott / Jordan Battle. I ultimately do think end of the year it's going to be Jordan Battle playing more of that strong safety role. I thought Battle was actually a great person to have as someone to take over that Von Bell role. I really love what, Duke Tobin's done as the GM for the Bengals. He's been able to address, kind of current needs, but also been able to draft a year or two down the line. And when they have a hole, they find a similar player type, and I think that's exactly what they did with Jordan Battle as a Von Bell replacement, but also Nick Scott, experienced veteran, so he can do a lot of different things, so you can plug him in pretty much right away and feel comfortable with him on the field. And then you get Mike Hilton, one of the better slot corners in football. You can use him as a blitzer. He's really good against the run, solid enough in coverage, former Steelers. So we'll talk about my Steelers later on in this video, but yeah, Mike Hilton Hilton's still playing at a really, really high level. So all that to say, obviously one of the best teams in football. So then we get over to the schedule side. We'll go game by game, and I'll showcase that, but don't really worry about that as much because when it comes down to it, there's going to be weird upsets that we can't predict, and there's going to be, division games where it's a road and road split instead of a home and home split. It's okay. Really focus on 14-3, 3-3 in the division, number one conference rank. I'm pretty high on the Bengals this year, and I wish I kind of pushed out this series a little bit earlier on because now I'm pushing out content. I've already mapped out my postseason predictions, and I have spoiler alert, the Bengals going pretty far, and I'm starting to see some people have Cincy as their Super Bowl pick. So now I feel like I'm on the latter end, and I'm kind of on the bandwagon of it as opposed to how I've actually kind of mapped all this out. But all that to say, I think the Bengals are going to be a really, really solid team. That running it back, keeping those 3 wide receivers. They didn't move on from T. Higgins, restructure the deal for Joe Mixon. I think this is kind of the year where if we're going to see Joe Burrow win a Super Bowl and he's going to have the most stacked roster around him, it's going to be this year. I also have to say as we're going through this roster, going through this schedule, you can see I have all 3 losses being in division. So is that likely? Probably not. They'll probably have a non-division loss in there, but that's just kind of how I see it early on. But I got to give a lot of flowers to Zach Taylor. I think he's done a really good job. He was a head coach that I wasn't really excited about when the Bengals hired him. I just thought that was kind of a weird move, and it was like, this guy has any sort of correlation to Sean McVay, so let's hire him. And because of that, that led to him getting a job, and then the beginning of his tenure was not all that great, to say the least. So I was a little hesitant, and I was kind of thinking, maybe after 2 years they move on from him. But ultimately, he's been able to kind of turn the keys over to Joe Burrow, and it certainly helps having great wide receivers, a franchise-level quarterback in Joe Burrow, an awesome defensive coordinator in Lou Anarumo, which, quick tangent here. I think this is going to be the year where Lou Anarumo lands the head coaching job, especially if Cincinnati does go as far as I think they will. And I think this is going to be the year where I think a lot of sweats in the football fan community know who Lou Anarumo is and understand how good he is as a defensive coordinator. I think the mainstream, media and just populous fans are going to catch on to that this year. And you're going to hear basically every NFL Sunday, talking heads basically saying, yeah, that offense is great, but Lou Anarumo. I can already hear that, a few months ahead of time. So I think he's going to get a lot of flowers this year, and ultimately I think he's going to land a head coaching job next coaching carousel. But we're early on, so anything's possible. But yeah, great coaching staff. Zach Taylor's done a great job, been able to kind of transform that offense as it's really come to fruition, and younger players have kind of stepped into the superstars that they've been. And Lou Anarumo is one of the best DCs in football. They have a ton of talent, and they play in a tough division, but I think they're a big reason why we look at the AFC North as such a tough division. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to our next team now, and that is going to be the Baltimore Ravens. And got to talk about the wide receivers off top. This is as much investment we've seen from Baltimore and a little bit of time when it comes to the Lamar Jackson era and getting them some pass catchers. OBJ, obviously just a 1-year deal, so not a huge commitment there. Nonetheless, a guy that last time we saw him play, I think he was on his way to potentially winning Super Bowl MVP. It was going to be him or Stafford, right? He was going crazy at the beginning of that Super Bowl prior to the knee blowing out. So I questioning if he's going to be the same guy post-injury, but we also live in a day and an age where ACL injuries are relatively easier to be able to come back from, so my hopes are high. And then, Rashad Bateman also coming off an injury. What does he look like? I'm still optimistic and glass half full on Bateman. I liked him a lot coming out of Minnesota. And then Zay Flowers, a guy that I liked a ton coming out of this last draft. And I think a guy they can use in a lot of different ways. He could be a better Devin Duvernay, just kind of as a gadget, yards after the catch, specialty component of the offense, while also being kind of the deep threat. OBJ can obviously be that over-the-top weapon, but this offense works best when its rushing attack forces safeties into the box, and then they have that counter to go over the top. I think Zay Flowers can be exactly that. The offensive line should be a really good one, assuming health, of course, which is obviously tough to do, but Stanley, when he's healthy, is one of the best in the biz. Morgan Moses is still playing at a really high end, really high level, that is, on the other side. Tyler Linderbaum proved to be one of the better centers in football, even as a rookie. Kevin Zeitler's still playing at a pretty high level. Got to figure out left guard, maybe Ben Cleveland, maybe someone else, but I think that's the one hole we're kind of TBD on right now, but I think they'll be able to manage through that. They get to the tight ends. Obviously, Mark Andrews, one of the best in the league at the position, and then Isaiah Likely, who's kind of the pseudo, he's kind of small for a tight end, but not uber athletic to be like a wide receiver, so he's kind of that hybrid, slot wide receiver, number 2 tight end that you don't really want on the line of scrimmage, right? So he's kind of in the perfect offense for him to thrive in, and I could see him being a big part of the offense as well. Lamar Jackson, obviously, a guy I've always been pretty high on, which is unfortunate as a Steelers fan, but I think he's just obviously a freak athlete, but I think he's an underrated passer for where most people see him at, and I know that's a hot take, but I think he's better than what some people want to give him credit for. I think he's kind of held back by the Greg Roman offense. It's not an offense passing scheme wise that really opens guys up and makes the game easy for Lamar Jackson. So Todd Monken coming in, former OC at Georgia, saw how much he did for Stetson Bennett going from the national championship team 2 years ago that was carrying Bennett to last year's Bulldogs team that won the Natty, where Stetson Bennett was as big a component to their successes anything else. So I think Todd Monken's be able to work that magic and be able to generate more passing, success for Lamar Jackson. Certainly helps having those more wide receivers as well. Patrick Ricard, I feel like he's a Ravens fan favorite there, so got to make mention of him. The offense, I'm a little worried about the front seven from a pass rush standpoint. Madubuike, kind of been waiting for him to break out for some time now. Michael Pierce, solid nose tackle. We obviously have Travis Jones, who second-year player at UConn, liked him a ton coming out of college. And then, Odafe Owe, third-year guy. Can this be his breakout season? We've seen some moments, specifically his rookie year. Super athletic guy, just hasn't taken that step forward towards like superstardom. And then, some of the other guys, David Ajabo, second-year guy out of Michigan, also has some injury in his background. So what does he look like in year two? That's obviously a wait-and-see type of situation. They are really strong at linebacker. I do anticipate it's going to be Trenton Simpson and Roquan Smith as the 1-2 guys. And then maybe in camp they trade Patrick Queen. Maybe he doesn't even make the 53. Like that really wouldn't shock me. He has not been that great in Baltimore. And Baltimore is a really smart organization. The only thing worse than making a bad draft selection is compounding that with continuing to get them on the field when they aren't a good draft selection. Like if they're not a good player and they weren't worth that first round pick or whatever, it's only going to get worse if you keep them on the field, right? And they don't play like a first rounder. So I think Baltimore's a really good organization to be able to like swallow their losses and move on. So I do anticipate Patrick Queen either being just a special teamer or maybe not even be on the roster. And I'm really excited to see that Trenton Simpson, Roquan Smith pairing. Because Roquan Smith, once he got to Baltimore, that defense really took a huge step forward. And that also coincided with the move in position for Kyle Hamilton, which we'll talk about in 1 second. The other pass rushing note here is Tyus Bowser. Not special, but good enough. So again, it kind of feels like they have some okay contributors as pass rushers, but man, if this team kind of had that T-Sizzle type of presence where you're saying that guy's going to get 12 sacks a year and I'm willing to bet on that, this defense could easily be one of the best in the league. But I just kind of think they're missing that high-end pass rush game-wrecking type of presence. So let me get to the secondary. This is kind of my other, potential area of weakness for this team. Marlon Humphrey is not it. I mean, I say that as he is not the weakness. I love Marlon Humphrey. I think he's a great player. One of the more underrated corners over the last couple of years, at least. I know he's had some rough games. I know he's also battled some injuries, but I think when he's at the height of his powers, he's as good as it gets in the NFL and in that top 5 to top 8 conversation. And right now they don't have Kyle Hamilton in the nickel, but really once they moved him to that nickel corner strong safety hybrid role, he stepped up his play and the defense took a step forward, and that also coincided with the trade for Roquan Smith. That number 2 corner spot, I'm a little iffy on, whether it's Jalen Armour Davis, who obviously missed a lot of last year and didn't look great while he was on the field for those 3 or 4 games, and then Rock Ya-Sin, who has been okay, but over the last couple of years, it's been a lot of playing cover 2 in that Matt Eberflus defense in Indianapolis, and then you go over to the Raiders. I'm just interested to see how he plays. Granted, I do think Baltimore, his assignment as the number 2 makes it a little bit easier, and I think Mike McDonald is a pretty solid DC. He proved that in year 1, so I'm really interested to see how he maybe tries to hide a Rock Ya-Sin or hide a Jalen Armour Davis to limit the potential exposure or damage those guys could have. Because go back 4, 5, 6 years ago, that 1-2 punch of Humphrey plus Marcus Peters was a huge reason why the Ravens defense was as good as it was. So I am concerned about what that number 2 cornerback position means for this team. But last position to talk about here is obviously Marcus Williams, one of the best true free safeties in the league. So not worried about him in the slightest. Okay, so now let's go ahead and jump over and take a look at this team's schedule. Obviously, as you can tell, I'm pretty high on this team. 10-7 overall, and I have them just missing the playoffs. I was a little surprised by that. So I only have one AFC North team getting into the postseason, which, again, did surprise me because I do think this is a great division. And legitimately, you could sell me on 3 teams making it. I wouldn't be surprised. I think the Goat House, actually, another YouTuber, did have 3 teams from the AFC North getting in. And that wouldn't shock me whatsoever, but I just have the Ravens on the outside looking in. And maybe it does take some time for that Todd Monken offense to really come to fruition. Lamar Jackson to get fully integrated into the offense and all that sort of stuff. And those wide receivers, can they stay healthy? There's a lot of question marks, but the murderer's row that is the AFC North is also a little tricky. And also you look at games like Miami, right? Like that. If I have question marks about your secondary and your pass rush, that's going to be a tough one for me to buy into you winning, right? The Jags game right there in Week 15, you could certainly bounce back the other way. They lost in Jacksonville last year. They're in Jacksonville this season, so I'm going to go ahead and have the Jags win that game. Also, I think the Jags are a pretty good team, as is. That Week 7 game between the Lions is going to be a good estimation to see like where this offense is at. Can they go toe-to-toe with what I think is going to be one of the best units in the league? That Seattle game is probably another one where Ravens fans are like, what? You have us losing to the Seahawks? You're crazy. Again, flip a coin. I'm not really too pressed to say that the Ravens are going to lose that one, but I got to give Seattle wins. And again, the most important thing here is 10-7. But this could easily be a team where if the offense hits the ground running, 12-5 isn't out of the cards. 13-4 isn't out of the cards. Like, this is kind of a team with a wide range of variance. I don't see, if Lamar Jackson's healthy, anything worse than 8-9. But the high side of this is like the offense looks great. Rock Ya-Sin's totally fine. Odafe Owe takes that step forward. They're able to generate pass rush. And this team goes like 13-4, 12-5. And that wouldn't shock me whatsoever. Because again, I'm very high on the Ravens. Just the schedule this year just didn't really play into their hands as much as I would have liked it to. All right, so moving on to our next team now, and that's going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. So again, I have to just make this note because I don't want anybody saying, oh, well, it's clear that you're higher on the Steelers or whatever. I am a Steelers fan, so I probably can talk ad nauseum about this team more than the other three just because my heart is obviously so attached to it. But where do we begin? So obviously I like the wide receivers. Deontay Johnson's a pretty solid player. George Pickens, I'm really hoping, leads this team in target share. It's, to me, last year it became really clear that Matt Canada was as big of an issue as he was when like George Pickens is finishing games with 3 and 4 targets. And it's like, man, it feels like you guys drafted a number 1 wide receiver in the second round and you're not leveraging that advantage enough. So we'll see what Canada does. Can they do more in the offense? Can they open it up for Kenny Pickett? Can we get more, advanced, passing, concepts to be able to open up these guys a little bit more and get some more targets for Pickens and Deontay Johnson? And then kind of finishing it off by talking about Allen Robinson. I've talked with a few other Steelers fans that are friends of mine, but I actually think Allen Robinson's just going to play the Chase Claypool role, but do it better. Claypool, his rookie year, started out as this guy who turned 50-50 balls into like 75-25 balls. And, he was, a big hype piece to begin the year, his rookie season. And there was a lot of excitement about him. And then right after like the first 7 weeks of his rookie year, that all flipped on a dime. He became a guy who wins 25% of those 50-50 balls. Meanwhile, Allen Robinson, he wasn't great with the Rams, but that's an offense where I think Sean McVay needs you to be a high-level separator. And that's not necessarily Allen Robinson's major calling card. But he is really good in the air, and he can still high point the football. So, again, getting back to my original point here, I think he's going to play that Chase Claypool role, but do it much more successfully. So I don't know how big of numbers he's going to have. I don't know if he's a guy that you're obviously clamoring for in fantasy football or anything like that. But I think he's going to be an upgrade to the Steelers' offense for what that does matter or whatever that does mean. They get to the offensive line. Broderick Jones, first-round pick. To me, pretty raw as a pass protector, but he had that, mauler, high-end athlete, super strong, great in the run game. He had all the boxes I think the Steelers were looking to check and kind of fit with their identity, right? Like, this is the team that drafted Najee Harris in the first round 2 years ago because they thought a running back was going to turn around their rushing, production. So, that's life as a Steelers fan, I guess. So I think Broderick Jones is going to be exactly the prospect I saw him as, like raw as a pass protector, but pretty good as a run blocker. Pretty solid scheme fit, taking advantage of his athleticism in the zone blocking scheme. So I think he's going to be a work in progress. But that being said, Dan Moore, as optimistic as maybe as I was for him as a 4th rounder 2 years ago, it just hasn't worked. So any sort of change is a good one to me and is a welcomed one in my opinion to try to see if you can get any sort of upgrade there on the pass production side. Isaac Seumalo, really underrated free agent signing, 3 years, $24 million. Same thing they gave to James Daniels, so they have slotted in right now at right guard. Mason Cole was fine last year at center, and Chukwuma Okorafor I don't think is very good, but his PFF grades have kind of gone up year by year. So as much as I do like their system, I think that's more of a product in a offense that gets the ball out quick, so therefore he doesn't give up a ton of sacks, he doesn't get beat very quickly, he doesn't give up a ton of hurries and pressures and things like that. Penalties have been an issue early on in his career, so I'm not as high on Chukwuma Okorafor, but again, we got an upgrade at one tackle. Beggars can't be choosers. Pat Freiermuth, pretty solid tight end. Kenny Pickett, I'm really excited to see what he looks like in year 2. Been a lot of reports that Matt Canada is now opening up the offense for Kenny Pickett because he now has a greater understanding of it. I hope that is not coach speak because I would certainly like to see that. And he definitely exceeded my expectations expectations. He was my QB4 out of the 2022 class, which was not a great QB class. And the reason he was so low was I just didn't see him having a super high upside. So in a bad QB class, shoot for the stars, let's go high upside play. And Pickett just wasn't that guy to me. But yeah, he was better last year than I anticipated. So I'm excited as a Steelers fan because of that. And then Najee Harris, who I do think is a really good running back, and Jalen Warren, a nice little compliment piece to him. The defense is really solid. Larry Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton. I was so pumped about that second round selection, the second of 2 that the Steelers made. We'll talk about the other one once we get to that left cornerback spot. Cam Hayward still playing at such a high level. He's one of those guys where, like when you talk about like Hall of Fame considerations, it's like I want to see a guy that for 5, 6, 7 years or something like that, you could make the argument he was the best player in his position. Or I want a guy for like a decade to 12 years that was easily in that top 5 to 8 conversation for players at his position. And Cam Hayward, as he's gone on in his career, has just found a way to kind of climb up the rankings. He hasn't reached Aaron Donald, maybe Chris Jones heights, but he was pretty solid, pretty good player, got in that top 10 mark, and then he got into his 30s, and all of a sudden became like easily one of the 5 best interior defensive linemen in the NFL, specifically as a pass rusher, and I still think of him as that. So, obviously still a big part of that Steelers defense, as TJ Watt, a one-time Defensive Player of the Year, winner, and then obviously a perennial candidate for that award. Linebacker, it's hard to imagine this position getting any worse than what it's been over the last couple of years. It's definitely been a problem spot for Pittsburgh. Cole Holcomb, not the best run defender, but a pretty solid coverage player, so I'll take that. Eldon Roberts, he's old, but he's fine. He's probably going to be good enough against the run. And then, Mark Robinson, Tanner Muse, okay enough depth. They just extended Alex Highsmith. He had 14.5 sacks last year, but a pass rush win rate at 11%. So basically, he had quarterbacks running away from TJ Watt and into his arms, running away from Cam Hayward and into his arms. So, do I feel like the sacks number was a little inflated? Yeah, but he is a high-end athlete, and he's pretty much gotten better and better year over year, the way I see it. So I don't mind the investment there. Comparing him to Bud Dupree, I think Highsmith is a better true pass rusher. I think Bud Dupree was probably a better run defender in Pittsburgh, so, give and take. And then we get to the secondary, and this is a spot where Pittsburgh has definitely been trying to find some upgrades, especially at cornerback, post-Joe Hayden era. Joey Porter Jr., and Patrick Peterson, 2 additions this year. Pat Pete, free agency. Joey Porter Jr., first pick of the second round. Obviously, the son of a former Steelers legend, Super Bowl winner, and Joey Porter Sr. These 2 guys just don't have very complementary skill sets. I just don't. I wonder what DC Terrell Austin is going to do with these guys. Because Pat Pete, at this point in his career, is a zone specialist. And Joey Porter Jr., not that he can't play zone, but this has been a defense that likes to play some man coverage. And we'll play some cover 3 off of it. But, Joey Porter Jr., most people would say his specialty coming out of the draft was man press. So I want to know how these 2 guys can coexist in the same defense. I'm really curious to see it. I don't have the answer, but I'm fascinated to find out what it is. Mika Fitzpatrick, one of the best safeties in football. Levi Wallace, solid, good enough player. I wouldn't be surprised if Corey Trice Jr., 7th round pick, but awesome size, fantastic athlete, just had injury concerns basically coming to Purdue. That had him last until the 7th round, but he's a guy, if he's healthy, there's no way he lasts there, just based off the height and the athleticism alone. So he could be a guy that maybe even supersedes Levi Wallace once we get to the end of the season. It wouldn't shock me as long as he's healthy. And then getting back to the safety position, Devontae Kazee, Keanu Neal, good enough guys. Kazee was actually pretty good last year when he got to play, so I'm interested to see what a full season of work looks like for Devontae Kazee. Let's go ahead and take a look at this team's schedule. I got them going 8-9, obviously missing the playoffs, 3-3 in the division, and they actually have the tie for the last spot in the division, giving away where I see the Browns going. That week 1 game against San Francisco, Pittsburgh has been kind of up and down when it comes to that run defense. Keanu Benton, I think, will make a difference there, but I'm a little concerned to see what that looks like, and I think San Francisco might be able to exploit that. On top of first game for a rookie corner, Pat Pete first game in Pittsburgh. I could also see where just kind of the Shanahan passing attack too kind of create some holes in that defense. The Raiders game week 3 is definitely one you could flip. I'm not going to argue with that. I think Pittsburgh on paper, better team, so 9-8, definitely don't rule that out. But I don't see the Raiders going winless. And if we're being honest, the Raiders should have probably won last year in Pittsburgh, if not for Derek Carr single-handedly throwing that game away. So we'll see. But you could also make the argument Pittsburgh's better this year versus last year. So the Colts game's another one where it's kind of 50-50. You could totally sell me on Pittsburgh winning that game on the road. But rushing quarterbacks have kind of long given Pittsburgh some headaches, and I think Anthony Richardson will be starting by week 15. So I could see the same thing kind of playing out. And then week 17 against Seattle, I think Seattle's kind of proven to be a better team. Steelers beat the Seahawks a couple years ago when Geno was in a spot start in spot of Russell Wilson. But I think that roster is much more his now, and I think ultimately it's become a better roster, both on both sides of the ball, really. And then I got the Ravens winning that Week 18 game. I do have them with a split with Baltimore, but I don't know, man. Baltimore, that could be another way where you get Baltimore another win, get them to 11-6, get them in the postseason. I could easily see them sweeping the Steelers this year. But yeah, I got my Steelers going 8-9. And ultimately, if Matt Canada's better than I think he is as an OC, this team could certainly be in that 10-win category. But I think he is who I think he is, to steal that iconic NFL quote. But that's going to limit the Steelers to a sub-500 record for the first time in the Mike Tomlin era. At least that's how I'm predicting it right now. And now we're on to the last team to talk about, the Cleveland Browns. So Amari Cooper, to me, is still a wide receiver one. Love the addition of Cedric Tillman. I think that just gives them an upgrade over Donovan Peoples-Jones. And I wouldn't be surprised if he ultimately wins that number 2 outside wide receiver job in training camp or anything like that. Elijah Moore, love that addition. It was kind of a low-risk, high-reward proposition. A guy that's been, production-wise, way undervalued to where the Jets drafted him. And him and Zach Wilson just weren't on the same page. So now he's playing with a better quarterback. And I think in an offense that kind of gives him a role where he'll have more production, and they can take advantage of his yak skill set, also using him as a field stretcher, which is something they don't necessarily have. DPJ is that field stretching, but he kind of wins with not only his athleticism, but just kind of in the air because he is so big, and he's pretty good at high point in the football. But Cedric Tillman may change that too, but he's not as great of an athlete as Elijah Moore is. So it kind of gives him that field stretching ability that I think he does better than the other guys in the mix in that wide receiver room. The offensive line, Jedrick Wills Jr., I know has been a disappointment. He hasn't been the best of those tackles that taken in the first round, but hasn't been terrible either. So as a Steelers fan, there have been plenty of years where I was like, man, if we just had Jedrick Wills at left tackle. So Browns fans, it could be worse. Joel Bitonio, Ethan Posich, Wyatt Teller, proven to be one of the best interior offensive lines in the league. And then Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin, still playing at a high level at right tackle when he's healthy. They also drafted Dewan Jones. Really interested to see what that looks like. A guy that kind of fell to day 3 because of potential character concerns, work ethic concerns. So that's always an interesting component of a draft profile because it's something I don't get. So I want to see how big of an impact it has, especially if Conklin gets hurt. How willing are they to turn it over to Dewan Jones as a starter? And then what does he look like as a starter at the NFL level? David Njoku had a breakout season last year, and I think he could be potentially even better this season. Deshaun Watson is kind of the linchpin in which this team is, their success is going to depend on him, which you could say that about any team in their quarterback, but especially Deshaun Watson, because the last 6 games of last year when we got to see him in Cleveland wasn't pretty. But you go back 2 years ago to 2020, yeah, the Texans were 4-12, but he was really good. And even the year before that, he was really damn solid. So, if he gets anywhere near that, above average to really solid level, this is easily a team that can make the postseason. I think it might take some time. I don't know. I have a hard read on what Watson I'm going to get this year. So I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. I'm kind of putting myself in no man's land because it's ultimately going to be more of what we saw last year, and this team's not going to be 8-9. Or he's going to be way better than he was last year, and this team's going to make the playoffs, and that's why, I got to give it up to the Goat House. He's predicting the Cleveland Browns to make the postseason. That's a roll of the dice. It's risky, but you can kind of get away with it in the way too early stages. So kudos to the Goat House for making that prediction. I'm just not quite there with Cleveland. Then get over the defense. You got to talk about Jim Schwartz. I think that is an upgrade as the defensive coordinator, and also Myles Garrett. Probably the best edge rusher in football. Him and Nick Bosa, probably in my opinion, are that number one conversation between those two guys. Micah Parsons maybe as well. And of course, I love TJ Watt. But this is easily the defensive line around Myles Garrett with the most talent that he's had while he's been in Cleveland, right? Like Dalvin Tomlinson plus Siaki Ika. Love that pairing on the inside. Jordan Elliott has been not great, but Arlette still has him as a starter, so we'll see. I could easily see Siaki Ika taking over in that role. And then on the other side, it's Zadarius Smith. They make the trade with Minnesota. I think that's easily the best edge rusher on the other side of the defensive line with Myles Garrett. Obo Okoronkwo. A lot of upside to mine there. Isaiah McGuire, high upside type of guy in this year's draft. Alex Wright, same could be said about the 2022 draft class. So they've just continued to pour resources in that defensive line, acknowledging that Myles Garrett's an alien, but it can't just be him. So I think that defensive line is really now in a spot to where it could be an absolute strength and maybe the single best unit on this team. I know it's hard to say because this offensive line's so good and Nick Chubb's a stud, but I can see this defensive line having that type of year where it's like, oof, sheesh, Cleveland took it to another level this year. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on now. Let's talk about those linebackers, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Anthony Walker Jr. If JOK's healthy, I think he's going to have a breakout season. Anthony Walker Jr., again, when healthy, has been a solid, capable, average level linebacker, and I think more of the same will be true this year. Then you get into the secondary, Denzel Ward, MJ Emerson. That's been a great 1-2 punch going back to last year. I mean, MJ Emerson was way better than I thought he'd be coming out of Mississippi State. And more so looking at it from a immediate standpoint, like he was way better right away than I thought they were going to be able to get him to play at. And then he kind of superseded and stole a starting job away from a former first rounder 2 years ago, and Greg Newsome. And I assume he's going to be around this year. I know there were some rumors about the trade request, but if he's playing the slot, oh my gosh, I mean that cornerback trio, is bananas good. So, yeah, love that cornerback trio as long as they can stay healthy. And we'll see. Greg Newsome doesn't strike me as a guy who should be playing in the slot, but get your 3 best corners on the field however you can. And then get to the safeties. Grant Delpit, I'm hoping he has that breakout season. Loved him as a prospect coming out of LSU. Just hasn't really happened yet. I think Juan Thornhill is another one of those really underrated free agent signings. Because Kansas City continued to utilize 3 safeties, they insisted on having Dan Sorensen on the field. Juan Thornhill's role was a little more limited. Now I think Jim Schwartz and in Cleveland, Thornhill's just going to kind of have full-time starting role, 900 snaps, whatever the case may be. And we're going to kind of really see his talent fully on display. And ultimately, it just didn't work out with John Johnson III. Part of that's Joe Woods, and maybe part of that's him. But I think new DC, change at safety was warranted. I think Juan Thornhill's in a really good position to have a lot of success. Let's go ahead and take the teams, look at the team's record. Got them going 8-9, which I already alluded to earlier on. 3-3 in the division. Again, the AFC North's really tough, so I basically had every team split with one another, which is a little bit of a cop-out, but that's kind of how the AFC North has long played one another. So I got them winning that Week 1 game against Cincy, which I didn't talk about with the Bengals, but since they lost Week 1 last year to Pittsburgh, I could kind of see history repeating itself, especially if Cleveland just kind of dominates time of possession, wins on the ground, Nick Chubb goes crazy. Yeah, I could see all that kind of playing to fruition. That Titans game's kind of an interesting one. I just trust the Titans' run defense a little bit more than the Browns right now, even though I will say, Dalvin Thomas and Siaki Ika, that should help a ton. JOK is more of a coverage specialist linebacker than anything else, so I think the Titans can have a little bit of a leg up on Cleveland there. But also, Deshaun Watson, if he's playing like 2020, 2019 version of himself, he's definitely got the edge over Ryan Tannehill, so could easily flip back the other way. They get a nice little win streak, 5 consecutive wins against Indianapolis, Seattle, Arizona, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. Nice little run, and I can totally see this team catching steam, right? Like if Jim Schwartz proves to be the difference on the defensive side, all the assets they pour in that defensive line makes it one of the best pass rush units in football. Wouldn't surprise me. And of course, Deshaun Watson playing like he did in 2019, 2020, this team easily could be a 12-win team. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. So the upside's definitely there. It's just I'm having a hard time buying into it fully. And I like Kevin Stefanski as the head coach, but I think his seat's pretty hot here, given the investment that this team and this franchise poured into Deshaun Watson. So big year for him, and I wonder how he handles that type of pressure. And get towards the end of the season, that loss to Houston. I think Houston's going to be a better team than a lot of people are expecting. 6-11 is what I got them at, but that's still a huge step up from where they were last year. And even with 11 losses, they could be really competitive in all 11 of those losses. And I think this is just a revenge storyline that we can all kind of see coming from a mile away, and I think Houston's been able to get that revenge on Watson. The Jets game, you could bounce that one either way. I just like the Jets roster a little bit more. I think Rodgers, even if Watson is back to where he was in, let's just say 2019, I think Rodgers is a little bit better still. And then the last game of the year against Cincinnati Bengals, to me, just a better roster, but I do have them splitting with Cleveland with the Week 1 loss. But that is going to do it for my AFC North way too early regular season record predictions. Apologies for my long-winded tangents. It's a division that I follow very closely because I am a Steelers fan, but I want to hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. Who do you have winning the AFC North? Are you as high on the Bengals as I am? Do you think they can win the number 1 seed out of the AFC and steal it away from Kansas City? And ultimately, how many teams do you think from the AFC North make the postseason? I'd love to hear your early predictions down below in the comments section. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hit that like button if you did. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. And let me know what you think about the new setup. I think this might be the new permanent way moving forward and how I will set up these videos, unless I hear some negative feedback, which this is your chance to give that to me. I will not take it personally. So let me hear your thoughts on the new look down below. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.